It is sponsored by an organization called Be Original Americas, and I'm going to introduce Beth Dickstein, who's going to tell you a little bit more about their organization, and then she's going to introduce our moderator. So, Beth, thanks for coming.
I have to say, that's the first applause I've ever gotten in my life. Thank you so much, really. Thanks for coming. Be Original was co-founded by me and another gentleman in July of 2012. And I'm very lucky. I have a PR and marketing firm in New York, and I represent some of the best lines that you all probably study or should study. From Alessi to Floss to Lean Rosé to Missoni. I know, and of course Artek and Fritz Hansen. So these people get knocked off a lot, and we decided to get together to educate, inform, and influence people on the value of authentic design and originality. And part of originality is creativity and innovation, and that's where you come in. And Cranbrook is the first school that we've ever spoken in front of. So now applause for yourself. And I think the panel will go through many, many things, but also it's not just not to copy, but it's how it affects our economy, how it affects our environment, and how it affects our ethics as a country. So I'm going to introduce Rob Kirkbride. He's the senior editor of Monday Morning Quarterback. And you say, what? Monday Morning Quarterback is a really important journal for the trade. And it comes out every Monday. Hello, hello. And it's, and Rob really took it up a huge notch. And he's the perfect person to lead this panel. So, Rob. Give him a hand.
I'm really honored to be here today, and thanks Beth for inviting me. And I think it's a really important topic, and what we're going to focus a little bit on today is the hard work that goes into design. Everything you see around you obviously is designed, and somebody worked hard on that. So we're going to talk about the value of that, how it's done, and maybe hopefully cause you to think a little bit about the work that you're doing, or if nothing else, the work you see around you. So let me introduce the panel. We've got great people here today. At the far end of the table is Clark Malcolm. Clark is a senior writer and editor and has worked for Herman Miller for 31 years. He has written for teams and individuals in almost every part of the company, from research and design to human resources and marketing. He has edited, written, and co-authored 16 books on leadership, architecture, design, and facility management. He has degrees in English language and literature and lives with his wife Judy in Ann Arbor. Next, we have Antoine Rozay. He founded Lin Rosé as a small walking stick business in Brioude, France in 1860. He didn't. He's a little young. Actually, his great-great-grandfather did, right? You're looking good for that age, 150 years old. The French lifestyle. The business has grown into a multinational company with factories in France, headquarters in Brioude, and more than 200 exclusive Lin Rosé stores and 800 retail distributors worldwide. He grew up in the city of Lyon, immersed in the family business, and he began his career working at luxury watchmaker IWC in Paris. Next, we have Felicia Ferroni. She was born in Chicago. graduated in architecture, after which she moved to Milan, and Ferrone's expansive reach is informed by her early experience as an architect in Milan. She is the founder and principal designer of her namesake label, Ferrone, founded in 2010. Her work is included in the permanent collection of the Art Institute of Chicago, winner of Good Design Award, and recently was awarded ASID's Best Furniture Collection at ICFF 2014. 3 months later, for Best Collection for her 4 distinct glassware collections at New York Now in August 2014. Next, we have Joe Connell. Joe works as a principal at Perkins & Will, and he's a thought leader in the area of workplace design. He challenges and inspires his team and clients to rethink the work environment in new and creative ways. He bridges the gaps between business, design, academia, bringing a differentiating perspective to each assignment. And next, you probably know Scott Klinker. He's principal of Scott Klinker Product Design and 3D designer in residence here, where he's taught graduate 3D design programs since 2001. His studio practice develops furniture designs for the residential and contract furniture markets. As a designer and educator, he has worked with design-driven companies such as Alessi, Herman Miller, Steelcase, Burton Snowboards, Fab.com, and IDEO, and he's an alumnus. Now on to the questions. And let's start at the end of the table with Clark. Clark, we've talked about original design taking hard work. Can you give examples of projects or products that you have worked on or Herman Miller has completed that took a lot of hard work and the results that came from that?
I don't think there's a single original design that would ever be.
I think we need to turn.
How's that? Yes?
That's better.
I don't think there's a single original design that's ever been easy. I don't think people luck into classic designs. I guess my own personal story is the invention of the Aeron chair, which began right down the road in Ann Arbor with Bill Stumpf and Don Chadwick, and it was the product really of research into a problem to keep older people at home longer. And this led in a 7-year process and many millions of dollars, and with lots of help from suppliers in Grand Rapids and DuPont, and eventually produced the Aeron chair, and I guarantee you it wasn't easy.
So tell me, when you look around, because the Aeron chair obviously changed the landscape of seating, you can't go to any office in the world without seeing a mesh back chair. Is that a form of flattery, or is it something different?
I'd like to hear from the rest of you the difference between a knockoff and a ripoff and an homage and an imitation, and I'm not sure the difference of all those things. I think at some point you cross the line between an imitation, but even Bill Stumpf and I think George Nelson said that shoulder climbing is quite all right. And if you can build on what other people have done, more power to you.
Antoine, do you want to take up that question about maybe some examples of projects and work you've done and the work that's gone into it?
I think recently we have been able to work with very talented designers like the Bourulec brothers, and the work that it takes to work with this designer is intense. We have developed products with them that took like more than 2 years on a modern product to develop just a dining chair, and it's a lot of time and effort and investments to create something. Coming back on the knockoff, I think is it flattery? Certainly not, because I don't see that as a flattery. Is it a result of the success? Probably, that's for sure. Now, I think there is you're right saying that there is a distinction between, there is a gray area between a knockoff and imitation. something that get closer without being really a knockoff. But knockoff for sure is not flattering, not for us.
I would say, for me, it's a question of, as a self-funded brand, for me, the sort of big effort is perhaps less in the development phase, and it's more in the financial phase, as I'm bootstrapping everything from production to all the distribution and everything. So for me, that's sort of my hurdle. So when I see someone infringe on my intellectual property, it hits me very close to home. Being a small company, just as it does large companies as well. But it feels particularly threatening, I feel, because it feels very, very personal. For me, I guess I've had situations where there's sort of a proliferation, sort of, in a particular area that I feel to some extent that I started in a very small way. And I don't know that I necessarily find it flattering, but I do feel like it makes me feel like I arrived at that point, at least first, to some extent. If it's a complete knockoff, it's a very upsetting fact. But to see sort of inspired by, I almost find somewhat flattering. At least just, me and my friends, we talk about it. But yeah, so I would say knockoffs that's the part that's just really upsetting.
Perkins Will does not design products per se. We design experiences, usually with a commissioning client, with known audiences, multiple audiences, and multiple experiences. So we can't as easily attribute one designer or one design effort to a full commission project experience, because there's outside, there's inside, and then it's often the products that these folks are working on are assembled in a certain way to make that space and that experience. And yet, each space, each building, each experience is unique. So in our world, often we're talking about objects that can be made in multiples here in discussion of knockoffs. In our world, in the built environment, we build only one. We're building, so think of designing and building one car. That's every one of our projects is like one custom car. So every project is a prototype. Every one is unique. Even if it's the same kind of building but a different site, it's unique. So it's one car, every time. So that said, the things that make up that space, it's a composition of a lot of different ideas. So authorship ends up being very important for us as a service providers, as the designers that work on it. We attribute even the photographers that help represent that story. So authorship is really important to us as part of our ethos. That's what authenticity is. That makes it a genuine experience. That's what clients rely on us for. That gives us credibility. So I think authorship leads to authenticity. Authenticity leads to predictable quality and accountability for the designing firm. That's the string that's really important to us.
I haven't often talked to the students about what we do as designers, and we say that we connect ideas with forms. And designers work very hard to connect an idea with a form and go through lots of iterations and refinement and mostly refinement to get the form of that product or that object to as closely align with your idea as possible. And the goal of that really is to give that, whatever you're making, some kind of humanity, to give it a soul. And to me, that's the whole goal of design. And when someone lifts that, they're usually lifting that as an image. They're not lifting all of the hard work and the nuance that you've put into that form. They're lifting the icon of the thing, and that's why it's usually a cheap substitution for the real thing. So I think for me, that's what we have to recognize in what designers do, designers align the idea with the form and work really hard to not only to make a prototype, but then to have that, the essence of that idea carry through to production in the smallest detail. And that is a lot of hard work. That's always hard work.
I had a chance to meet with Niels Diffriant a few months before he passed away, and I was in his studio, and he was telling me about the work that went into an arm mechanism on one of his chairs he designed for human scale. And he said he had been working on that arm mechanism for 7 years, just the arm mechanism. And he still felt like he didn't have it quite right, which was his way of constantly working on that. And I want to explore a little bit the amount of time that goes into design, because time is money. Can you tell me specifically some of your projects or pieces that you've worked on and the time that went into it, and how valuable that is to you? And anybody who'd like to jump in on that.
You've started us down this path, Rob. I'll just be second. You're right about the time it takes, and I think if you think about somebody like Vladimir Horowitz, who performed until he was in his 80s and made everything look effortless, but you never forgot how many years it took him to reach that stage in his life. And I think that's exactly what happens in design. My good friend and colleague, Steve Frickholm, a graphic designer, won every award in the book in 1985 with an annual report that had every employee's picture in it, all 3,000 Herman Miller employees. And each one was hand cut out and laid up. This was before computers. And everybody had their picture taken, and each one was sized, and each one was stripped into the annual report, and all for the sake of showing the importance of each person. And that took forever, drove me crazy.
Without going to specific models, I already explained, for example, like products like the one of the Bow Lake, the dining chair facet, took us like more than 2 years. Time is really the essence of good design, I think. We do believe that without time, you can't really like find the right solutions to a problem. You can't find the right materials. You can't find the correct suppliers or the correct technique. From a design that is coming from a designer, a drawing, and to the prototype, it takes a very long time. We have to discuss with the designer a lot. It's a human relationship. Never forget that there's human in this business. It's not only machines. So it takes a long time to understand where the designer wants to go and how we can do that together. And then we go to the more like manufacture part, and you have the prototype part that takes a very long time, and it's by finding the correct materials, filling materials, the mechanisms sometimes, the foam, the textile, everything. Put that together, so it's quite a long process. You have what we call the pre-industrialization, and that's an important stage, I think, of the manufacture that not a lot of people are aware of. It's you never show a prototype technically, or what you're gonna sell has nothing to do with a prototype. The prototype is just the first stage from the drawing to the real physical product. And then we go pre-industrialization, meaning that the prototype is gonna be dismantled and recreated by engineers, and that will analyze every single piece and see how we can make it at a more specific cost, if you want, and how much time it's gonna take to do every single part of the product. So we know by heart, we know there is no thing to, it's not something bizarre. We know exactly how many minutes, hours we're gonna have to cut the fabrics to upholster this. So this is calculated. And then from the pre-industrialization, we show the products first time to the public, the professional public, and with their feedback, we go to the industrialization. And all this time, it's very important. It goes from a minimum 2 months to 2 years, 3 years. It could be like, we are working still on products, so we are saying maybe one day we will do it. But And time is really the essence of good design. I do believe that without time, you don't have very good design.
Yeah, I would say even in small batch production, you still have that entire process that's continual refinement of your idea. And so in that together with, I think it is a lifetime to create a body of work, and each piece comes on the shoulders of the previous piece and previous information that you've sort of gathered through your process, and just learning about other things. So it's you can't quantify it, really, because everything's it's all the investment. It's not just about that one piece, but it's about all the pieces that came before it and all the pieces that will come after it is the true investment, I think, in the end. So it's especially on well, that coupled with, I think the small batch, the learning curve is different and probably slower than working with, expert engineers and things like that on a much larger scale.
I think that's an important question for you, Joe, especially working on space.
It is. When we work on spaces, we don't do individual homes, but we do places where people live, they work, they learn, they heal. So these are usually organizations that are commissioning us, or enterprises. So it's more like a business-to-business relationship. But each of those commissioners has a business context, even if it's a not-for-profit, or we've worked on for the government, for instance, for an embassy, or we did the headquarters for the U.S. Coast Guard. So even though it's not a business, it certainly behaves like a business. And part of the business context is that there are constraints. Schedule and budget, of course, are very real. There are programmatic issues that are, hopefully as richly as we can determine the needs, human needs, emotional needs, messaging needs, and of course, anything that takes up floor space and accommodating technology. But there's usually a somewhat fixed or somewhat finite amount of time. So the way we have to work time is if we have an end date that's fixed for business reasons, then we have to put more people on the task to get it done at that same time. So if there's a more complex task and it's a short time frame, of course, we'll start to load up, and teams can go from 6 to 16 to 26 as needed to hit those marks. And there's different skills and different skill sets for being able to work in those kind of team contexts and be able to certain projects break down well. Some projects don't break down well at all, and those get really difficult. But we have to have people that work really well with ambiguity and really work well with each other. So those are prerequisites for working on large assignments, because you're working on top of each other for usually compressed and fixed times.
And just to follow up on that with you, do your customers understand that need for time? I mean, do they appreciate that good design sometimes takes a long time to do?
No.
Kind of knew that was coming.
No,
They don't want to pay for it.
They don't. And of course, it's a competitive marketplace. They have a lot of service providers that they can talk to. So we are all, they want to pay as little as possible, but still get great work and have a good sense of chemistry with that team that seems to get them. So just like you would pick your doctor or your lawyer or other professionals in your life, it has to be a pretty smart match, but you have to have either the bench and technical strength, or maybe subject matter expertise in-house or with them, or bring it onto the team to be able to attend to that. Now, the more sophisticated the client, meaning the more sophisticated their project is, they have a better appreciation for the necessary steps and checks and balances. Most of the buildings that we're working on, if it's a new building, we think of those as at least 25 to 50-year buildings. So they have a very long sense of futurity, that these are important decisions that affect people for a long, long time. In a lot of commercial interior spaces that are in central business districts, clients don't want to own a building. They want to lease a space for an intermittent time. And those spaces turn over more frequently. Often those spaces are designed and delivered in 20 months. I mean, that's a pretty common size for a medium or small law firm. If there are several floors in a building, that might be a year and a half, but still require a team of a dozen to 2 dozen people at different points.
About time. Yeah, building on what Felicia said about ideas being cumulative. I think about when people ask me how long a design took to make. I could say it took me a year, but I'm really thinking it took me a year plus 30 years, to become a designer, to learn how to design. And I think that's an important part of authorship, and it's the part of authorship that you're paying for when you're buying original design. The other thing I think about is that personally, I think the best ideas come from your hands and rather than your head. And working with your hands takes time. It takes time invested in materials and process, and takes time to make mistakes and to kind of work through failures to perfect things. And it's much different than, we live in a kind of cut and paste culture because of the internet of cut and paste imagery, where imagery is easy to steal, but when you steal a design that someone has invested a lot of time and development and engineering into, it's quite different because you're stealing much more than an image.
And to that comment, and I think it's really, at least in my context, and y'all can go back to my schools. I came into the profession when you came into the architecture world because you could draft well, which isn't necessarily the case now. So it was manual drawing, and where I went to school in Southern Illinois, which was a school established by Buckminster Fuller, so it was very much a systems thinking place. And one of our first drafting instructors assigned one drawing. They said, you just need to turn in this one drawing at the end of the semester, but you need to have completed 500 before you turn in that one. I only need to see the one. And that was not an issue of time, that was the issue of iteration. And that's what clients don't fully appreciate, is you lose so much sleep over these ideas and refinement, and those are the ones you don't even draw. But the ones there should be just mounds of bad ideas around the table before you've got the right one in front of you. And that's the only one they see. And that's the only one, and that's the one that the knockoff artist is going to slip out and take. That's the part where the frustration comes.
So with that in mind, why is it worth it? I mean, what comes from this that, in your, just from a soul perspective, what makes it worth doing this hard work and investing this time and money?
I do believe that all people around this table love creativity, and that's the only reason. It's creativity. We like to see better things. We like design, and one of the definition of design is creating better product, better things for every day, and that's why we do that. We are here for that. When the knockoff industry is only there for the dollar amount, the money. And we are here, we are pushing, we are continuing to spend some time and money on development, having the know-how, the engineers, the people behind us, because we love creativity, and it's our job to continue to do that. If we stop, the knockoff industry will stop too. I mean, they will continue to produce what they know, but they won't be able to go further down because they won't have like anything to knock off anymore.
I would just say absolutely for the love of creating work, without a doubt. If someone were to knock off every single piece I did 5 minutes after I did it, I almost wouldn't care, because it's about the personal challenge and the excitement and just the unknown of creating new work. So for me, it's purely that. If I never even got a dime from it or anything, I would still do it, because it's just the love. And I think what we do, it's all about the passion that we share for design and creativity. And so I think we'd probably all, my guess would be we'd all kind of keep doing it regardless.
I couldn't agree more with you and Antoine, and I'm not a designer. I don't create things. I rearrange words every once in a while. But speaking from Herman Miller's point of view, we look at it as kind of our responsibility to protect the people who do bring creativity to us. The designers that work for us are not regular employees, and we pay them royalties. And it is good design and good designers are rare things, and our royalties are a way of protecting them and allowing them to be creative, and that's why we're so adamant about original design.
Yeah, I think design has a kind of intrinsic value that it makes me happy to be creative and to design. However, it also needs to have a kind of extrinsic value in that I need to get paid in order to continue to enjoy its intrinsic value. So, and so if someone comes along and eats the lunch that I've made, then I'm not, going to go hungry, and there's going to be nothing, I won't be sustained to keep creating. So, yeah, that's the way I feel about it.
It's hard work, but if you don't get joy from the work, then it's the wrong place for you, right? But I think designers in general are very optimistic people and always thinking there's a chance to do some better in the world beyond what's in front of us as a drawing board or as a word processor or table. There's a bigger world out there that we think our needs and our observation skills and our creativity can serve, and that's where we get sort of joy of the work and joy of when it goes out there and has an impact in society.
That kind of leads to the next question. Design begins with curiosity and creativity, and both take work. How do you work at that creativity and the curious part of design?
I will start. Today, I mean, Lynn Rozay is, we are pretty happy on that part, or lucky, not happy, but lucky. We have designers coming to us, and we are working with only freelance designers, more than 100 from all around the world. So the creativity is really coming from the designer. And what we try to do on our side as a manufacturer is really to be able to transform an idea, a drawing, as a product, and try to stay as closest as possible of the first idea, and not try to deform the product. Sometimes you have to do some concessions, but that's really what how we became creative, is through you designers and having a chance to receive plenty of drawings or ideas and to be able to review them all around the year. Sometimes we also scout for designers, and we go to the fairs, and during the major fairs, especially in Europe, IMM in Germany, or Maison Objet in Paris or Milan, and you always have this young designer part, and trust me, the first day before, even before the opening, you always have like manufacturers around and looking for the one, and we are part of these guys also. So it's a mix between the two.
I think it's, if it's about kind of finding the creativity, for me it's just about just living. I get very inspired by a manhole cover biking somewhere. So I think it's just keeping your eyes open and trying to look at everything in a very fresh light, even if you're in the same environment constantly. Yeah, it's really basic. I mean, it can be anything, literally, from something significant, a significant piece of work, to an anonymous thing that wasn't technically designed, something that was just made, and perhaps even by an engineer who wasn't even thinking about the aesthetics, but it could have a very minimalist sort of thing that captures my attention. So I think it's just really, and I think it's that thing of constantly being aware of every little thing around you and finding inspiration in it.
And kind of building on that, I think of the idea of constant research. That, I mean, it's a kind of awareness, but if there's a particular market that you're interested in, or a particular problem, that just staying tuned into that problem. Like I asked you earlier, you're an expert in the contract furniture market, and I asked you, what are the hot issues that you're seeing? Because you and I are both, it's our job to kind of understand what's happening with how the workplace is changing, so that we can, so that you can report, and so that I can generate ideas about new solutions. So that idea of constant research is important to me. And then in terms of creativity, I just think of the studio, that that's what the studio is for. The studio is a laboratory for testing ideas, and that is what the studio is for, creativity. So I think that's essential part of a design practice.
Yeah, I think that what we require of ourselves and of the people that we work with and usually working for is intense curiosity. That's if you're just intensely curious, you'll pick up on details. You'll start to connect dots that don't look like they connect, and you'll just stay so curious. So I think that intense curiosity in the most expansive way possible is really important to be able to continue to be refreshed. The other is that since we're working usually trying to help solve a puzzle for an organization in their space, we get to be, I don't know a better way to put it, but I'll say we're voyeurs. We get to peer behind lots of organizations to find out how they tick, what makes them cultural, unique from their competitors, what arrangements of spaces and people and teams and light and dark, what makes them work, what makes them effective, and that is different every time. And that's when you never know what the day is going to like, because client, even let's just pick a law firm or an ad agency, they are doing the same thing. They're recruiting from the same labor pool. They're competing for the same business, but they are all so uniquely different culturally. So how do we create a context for them to succeed and for them to stay curious and add value in their world? And so that puzzle, that really soft part of the puzzle is really interesting. And if you don't have curiosity for that, it's too hard, it's too unrewarding if you don't love that part of the work.
A phrase that's always stuck with me is one that Herman Miller executive put into a brief for the Bath building built by Nick Grimshaw in 1976, and it was, "Be open to beneficial surprise." And that's the way to keep curious.
When I was at Orgatech 2 years ago, I was in a booth that was filled with knocked off furniture, and one of the chairs was really interesting in that it had the mesh shape of an Aeron chair. It had the arms of a human scale Liberty chair. It had the base of some other chair. And I wrote about it, and I called it a Franken chair. And the owners of this company wrote me an email and said, "How dare you say that about our chair?" And I invited them to sue us if they felt that was important to them. But each of you guys have experienced, or at least seen, if not your own work, the work of others knocked off. How do you respond to that? I mean, how do you challenge people? Do you? I'll leave that question open.
For us, the best answer is to continue to be creative and to continue to be on the top front, being a trendsetter, not a follower. Obviously, it's you have all the big toolbox to go after these people. So this is probably the internal part that we keep on side. We created Be Original with other manufacturers to be able to discuss this topic. So it's also a way to fight against this problem. But really the biggest answer is for manufacturers like us is to continue to be more creative. The more we're going to invest in tools, techniques, and things like that, the more difficult it's going to be for a knockoff industry to produce our product at a cheap price or a cheap way or a low price. And we arrive at a stage where when we have a very iconic product in terms of image, we know that it becomes very challenging for these people to go after us with a technique. And if you really see the knockoff industry, a big part of the knockoff industry today is on a product that has been created a very long time ago. So you feel that they are more, they are probably more the knockoff industry is more aware how to do this kind of stuff, or kind of do this kind of stuff, where if you continue to invest on brand new products and things like that, it's much more complicated for them. So you have to challenge them, kind of.
I agree. I think the answer is to just always stay ahead of the curve and push yourself at your creative limits. Unfortunately, legally there's very little protection. And even if there were, the legal fees associated with such pursuits are cost prohibitive. And just because you don't know what the outcome's going to be, and again, then it's per country you would have to file, and it just becomes this thing where only the lawyer sort of benefits in the end. So I think to some extent, as awful as it is, you just kind of have to shrug it off and move on. I mean, you can start with the simple letter, and sometimes that works, actually, because people know what they're doing. And it's just enough of a threat at times that it just kind of gets them to back off from what they're doing. When they're a much larger company whose kind of design mission you can read through the pages of their catalogs is to be very closely inspired by, going up against huge big companies, a letter from my attorney, as wonderful as it may be, won't do much. So, again, you're stuck with the attorney fee and no results. So it's just about being creative, really, and moving forward.
In space design, I guess I look at it two different ways. One is the demand side for knockoffs or counterfeits, and the other is the supply side. And these guys are talking about the supply side. In other words, the competitors that are taking something and trying to make a counterfeit. When we are on projects where we think that's happening, where we know a client or one of their actors, like a furniture dealer or a contractor or some other agent involved in the procurement process of the goods that go on a project, are looking for substitutions or imitations. If we know about that, then we can interject as best possible. And one is as an industry, we need to probably be much more forceful in our language, but to try to shut that down first through some education. It's not what you think it is. It's an imitation. It's a counterfeit. It's probably a violation of someone's intellectual property. It's plagiarism. So if that ethos doesn't appeal to them in some way, and they're going to continue forward with that purchase, then we push ourselves away. So we've seen people that have tried to. We've done a custom carpet, let's say, and they were going to get it from another manufacturer than the one we developed it with. And we'll say, you're on your own. We're not putting it on our drawings. We can't accept it from a fire code standpoint. We will not inspect it upon installation. We will not represent it as part of the payment for the contractor, and we'll make them feel and be actually alone in that process. And they don't like to be alone. They've paid a lot of money for service providers. So when we put up that wall and say, we can't support that, they take notice. It still happens. It mostly happens. If that's going to happen, it usually takes place outside of our vision and usually offshore. When it's projects, for the most part, in North America, we rarely see it. People don't tend to come to Perkinsville looking for imitation products. So it's a little bit self-selecting there, but we know it's pervasive. But I think our industry does need to do, and we have to do more strident use of language to try and reduce the demand.
I recently had this experience where a chair I designed a couple years ago that was part of a collection called the Trust Collection. Actually, this was just a couple weeks ago. A friend of mine brought this to my attention that he found the chair for sale on a Chinese furniture manufacturer's website. And not only did they steal the design, they stole the name and they stole my photographs. They didn't even like make their own and make their own photographs. So they took everything. And there's really nothing I could do. Like Felicia said, in terms of there's no legal thing you could do. You could write a letter. Nowadays, one thing you could try to do is a kind of shaming campaign through the network, but that really doesn't work. That wouldn't work in this case for an obscure Chinese chair factory. If it was a big brand like, you know, if Crate and Barrel stole my design, a shaming campaign might work, like that might work. But that's one sort of defense that you can take. But for me, in terms of my own practice, I mean, the real defense is work for better. Like in this case, I can't do anything because that client was a small company that can't really defend itself. And so in terms of my own practice, I want to work for bigger companies that can defend themselves so that doesn't happen again. So kind of, it's sort of like working your way up the food chain in design. You want to work for better, bigger companies that are going to partner with that can protect your designs. The bigger companies have the sort of the legal power to protect their designs.
Herman Miller has actively done that. I mean, you guys have really worked hard to protect your designs and gone to court to do that, and have been successful, haven't you? Somewhat, at least.
I think in the end, whether you're original or not is a choice you have to make. You just have to decide. There are lots of courses to make money. And Herman Miller, 80 years ago, chose this kind of original way of coming at furniture. When the first design director at Herman Miller called us immoral for reproducing 18th and 19th century furniture designs. After that, we said we weren't going to do that anymore. And so the entire feeling with us and in our respect for the designers who bring us their ideas is that, yeah, we're going to fight for their ideas, and we're actually fighting for their livelihood and also the future ability on their parts to give us something even more original.
Well, we covered a lot of different topics already, but I wanted to give you guys a chance to ask any questions you might have. I think we've got about 10, 15